Are you ready for the third annual Gala Dinner? The Association of Zambians in Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia will this year host the third annual Gala Dinner on August 24th, 2024. There will be lots of exciting entertainment and we're expecting high-profile special guests. Be sure to stay glued to AZDMV Facebook page for more information. Save the date.
Hi everyone and welcome to the show. It is Saturday in July 2024 and we do appreciate you joining us and being with us today. We have an exciting discussion today and this is what you may tend to call as an elephant in the house. We are speaking about load shedding and what are the possible solutions. Before we begin the conversation, please inform or let a friend know that ZBTR is live and you can't miss this discussion. That is our link right there. We are on Facebook, YouTube, and X, which used to be Twitter. Just search for ZBTR TV and you are going to find us. All right, we need to get underway here because we have a lot to discuss and a lot to talk about here. My guest is Dr. Emmanuel Matsika, and he is a founder and CEO of Triet Solutions, Zambia Limited. It was registered in 2021. The company aims at implementing engineering, energy systems, and transport solutions in Africa. A mechanical engineer, he holds a PhD in railway safety, a master's degree in mechanical engineering degree. Dr. Matsika is done a lot of research work at the university in England. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
How is Lusaka today?
Lusaka is good, other than the load shedding.
Other than the load shedding, the very subject we are talking about today. Okay.
Yeah. It is the very subject we're talking about. So it took a lot to make sure that I can be online today because I'm actually in a load-shedded area. So I have to make sure that my laptop is fully charged, the phone is fully charged. So I have to then hotspot from my phone as opposed to using the Wi-Fi.
All right. Let's get right into it. Tell us a little bit about Triet before we get into the conversation. What is Triet? What does your company do?
Yeah, so there are two companies, businesses that I'm actually representing. One is Triet Solutions. So Triet Solutions is a solution-based business entity in Zambia. And in fact, the motivation for having Triet Solutions and the solutions is really emphasized is because this time I would visit Zambia from UK, I was inundated with problems and challenges very few people ever talked about solutions. So I said, can we change the subject and can we talk about solutions? So then when we looked at what are the key challenges and the
Yes.
problems within, especially the SADC region, we listed 8. And on top of that was energy. The number 2 was
Wow.
transport. So that's why
Okay.
we said, let's start tackling energy first, then we can deal with the others. So after that, to make sure that we also have a focused company on energy, we then registered another company called Triet Energy Zambia.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Interesting. Okay, Dr. Matsika, I know we talk about load shedding. Okay. Um, you're an engineer, and this is your area of work or focus, so to speak. Give us a history of how did we get to this point? What led to load shedding in Zambia?
Load shedding. Yeah, I think it's about semantics sometimes. There are two, I think, phrases that you tend to hear. One would be load shedding. The other one would be load management. Yes. So now, load shedding as we know it today, Zambia experienced first in around 2015, 2016. That's when we had a real serious drought that resulted in what was officially then called load shedding. Because then
Okay.
ZESCO had to balance and manage the load versus the supply. At that time, that's when we had the least amount of power that was generated from our reservoirs in the country, because we rely heavily on hydro power. So
Yeah.
that's 2015 was the first, 2016. Then from there on, it seems that the frequency of droughts has increased while the demand for power has increased. And so the severity of the droughts has actually increased. And this year's is the worst ever.
Okay.
So that's
So
where this is all started. And
you mentioned something. So draw the parallel between load shedding and load management. What really is the difference?
that's why those are semantics, I think, that they're quite interesting because, in fact, at the beginning, before load shedding started this year,
Yes.
ZESCO did emphasize that they're just doing load management. So you're simply managing the loads, and then so you're simply balancing what's going out, what's coming in, until we reached a point where now we had to stop completely. And when you stop completely, that's when you get into a more serious situation of load shedding. You literally cut off for long hours. Like right now, most of us are 12 hours off electricity per day, 12 to 15 hours roughly, no
Okay.
power.
You've already alluded, or I mentioned that our main source of power is hydro. What was the Kariba Dam's generation capacity when it was built, and has it been improved on since it was constructed?
So in terms of the initial or the intended capacity for the Kariba Dam, so it was based on the dam that was built, and therefore you know how much water would be available, the maximum quantity of
Yes.
water available to generate the power. The installed capacity is 1,080. That's the Kariba Dam, 1,080 megawatts.
Okay.
That's the installed capacity.
So what does that entail?
Yes, that's
how much can it? How much can that cover or cater for? Because the highest consumer of power in Zambia, like you rightly told me behind the scenes, is the mining industry, and we'll get to that.
absolutely. So I think it's quite important to take note of the fact that it's not just Kariba. So we have Kafue uh, Gorge, then we even now have Kafue Lower, which is 750 megawatts, just came on stream fully almost about a year ago. We have Victoria Falls. So we've got other reservoirs that generate power.
Okay.
So the actual installed capacity in Zambia is approximately 3,800 megawatts. And out of that, about 85% comes from hydro.
Okay.
So it's a bulk. That's why if something goes wrong with hydro, because the bulk of the supply, then you discover that the impact are very high. So in terms of what would 1,000 megawatts cover, most of that goes to the mines. So you could probably power maybe about 2 to 4 mines, big mines.
Okay.
Mines take up quite a lot of power. They need baseload power, so they are running 24/7, and
Yes.
each mine can take easily from 200 to 400 megawatts.
Megawatts.
Easily. The ones in Zambia'S. There are even others take far more than that. Like the ones in Congo now, we have big mines that can require 2,000 megawatts easily.
Oh, wow. Just one mine, 2,000 megawatts.
You can go as far as that. Yes. Yes.
We know historically, even from our social studies, that the mines were operating before the Kariba Dam was built, right? And the other ones that you've mentioned, Victoria, Kafiwe. So what was the source of energy generally for the country, and where were the mines getting their source of energy before these dams were built?
Most of the power prior to the dams came from coal. I think some of you might remember the famous Wange coal plant. So that time we had a federation of Rhodesian Nyasaland. So
Yes.
we were able to produce power from anywhere on this any one of these countries. But most of what we produced was a thermal plant. A thermal plant is a plant that uses heat to generate power. So coal is used as a solid fuel to generate power. So it's called thermal power plant. So we depended quite heavily on thermal power plants. But then when we required to have more power for the mines, especially in Zambia, some other sources of energy had to be considered. So that's where things like the Kariba Dam was built, mostly to service the mines.
Are those thermal, the thermal stations, are they still operational today?
Yes. Interestingly, they are, for example, a country like Zimbabwe, the Wange, they stand at over 1,500 megawatts now of thermal power plants. Zimbabwe has quite a large percentage of that. And then in Zambia, what had happened with Zambia historically is when we relied so much on hydropower, we shifted from coal-based generation mostly to hydro-based generation. And I think there was a point actually in Zambia where we were 100% hydro at one point. But then the need arose where we had to reconsider that because the need for electricity outweighed some of the discussions around whether using clean energy or not. So that's how now Mamba Coriolis came back on stream with 300 megawatts. And now, because of the crisis, another 300 megawatts is actually being planned for Mamba Coriolis to raise it from 300 megawatts to 600 megawatts within the next 2 to 3 years.
Okay, that's interesting. Other than hydro power energy, what are Zambia's sources of electricity? And could you also highlight, this is where now Triet comes in, the work that you are doing. Could you please highlight that aspect of the energy sector?
Yes, so the Department of, or the Ministry of Energy, led through the government of the Republic of Zambia, has developed what's called the integrated resource plan. So the integrated resource plan looks at the energy demand and projection up to 2050. And then they've come up with what are the possible sources of energy that should be considered. Now, what has become very clear is dependence on one form of energy or one source of energy tends to risk the energy supply. So now the country is considering what's called an energy mix. So the only way you can assure energy security is through having an energy mix, because each energy source has got its own pros and cons. But if you mix these, the benefits of each put together can actually improve the energy security of the country. So the ones that are being promoted at the moment, there are 6 green or renewable energies, and then one which is non-renewable. So the one that is non-renewable is the core that I mentioned earlier. So it's being considered to increase that. Then the 6 renewable green energies, the first one is solar PV, because we do have quite significant sunshine around Zambia, although solar PV has got quite a significant low capacity factor, it's being considered. So solar PV is one of them. And then hydros are still being considered, especially like mini hydros are being considered, but even some other bigger ones, as much as 200 megawatts or even more, they're still being considered. And then there's what's called geothermal. Geothermal is where you use the heat directly from the Earth's crust. So there's steam that comes out and you can generate power. Then the other one that's being considered in the energy mix is called biomass. It's easy to think about that. Like if you think about Nakambala Sugar, now it's called Zambia Sugar PLC. So the plant uses the bagasse, the biomass from the sugarcane, and you can produce electricity from that. So biomass, there are so many sources of biomass. You can use grass, you can use agricultural waste to energy. So it's quite a large resource. Then you can also consider wind as well. And finally, the one that's being considered is what's called runoff river, where you divert a river, and then in some point downstream, it goes back, the water goes back into the river. But at that time, you have a head that allows you to generate some electricity. Normally, that's not like a huge head. It could be 2, 3, 4, 5 to 20 meters, for example. Yes. But there are other new technologies, like the one we are promoting as Triet Solutions. It's called the Hydrokinetic. You can talk about it later on. It's also one that we have started promoting in Zambia.
You've made when you mentioned the solar, you refer to it as low capacity factor. What does that mean?
Yeah, so that's I think we are very familiar with the concept of efficiency, but capacity factor is something else. So capacity factor is it's a relationship between the peak level that you're able to perform versus what overall you actually perform. So you could be, and it could be, for example, if I use a human resource example, someone goes to work, the peak is 8 hours. You're supposed to be putting in 8 hours, but typically, especially depending whether it's public sector or private sector, I find that some people put in 4 hours, others 2 hours. So the capacity factor, if you're putting in 2 hours, is 25%. So now solar, by design, it's got a technological limitation. For example, when you go day and night, you're already losing the 50% of what you could probably do, assuming that the sun sets at 6 and rises at 6. And then on top of that, you do have rain season, you do have winter. So before you realize what you can possibly hit as your peak, say if it's 100, you only end up achieving, say, 20%. So each one of these technologies have got an associated capacity factor. Yes, so it's got a peak that it can reach, but overall across the year, the capacity factors range from about 17 to about 90%, depending on the technology that you're looking at.
Okay, so in Zambia right now, how much of solar have we harnessed in the energy industry? Are you able to speak to the generation capacity from the solar energy sector?
The number will be Again, almost it's quite difficult to say the actual number, but I can talk about the scenario and what's happening. So you notice that in, currently about 3% of the power on grid actually is solar. So we are feeding solar into the energy system. CEC, for example, they now have like the 34 megawatts in Riverside, Kitwe. They've just commissioned a 60 megawatt in Itimpi. They will extend that by another 120. So that is ongoing. So we have a number of projects that are in the development stage. So the actual numbers can range from about 1,500 to as high as 2,500 megawatts of solar PV that is currently under development. So there's a lot of activity going on. There are tenders that are out there. For example, ZESCO just sent out a tender for 300 megawatts. The other companies, so that is becoming quite active. But as people are doing that, they're also cognizant of the limitation of, for example, solar, where you need baseload power, continuous supply of power. You have to deal with the intermittency of solar. By design, it's intermittent, and it can bring some instabilities in the system, but there's a way to try to minimize those instabilities.
Okay. Let's zero into what you have alluded on. It's one of the items listed here. River, IRO, I believe that is what Triet is focusing on, right?
No, we are not focusing on that. That is what is in the integrated resource plan, which is what has been published by the government. But by the time that the document was being written, the technology that we are promoting, which is hydrokinetic, had not really come into Zambia by the time that the document was being written. So our technology coming in as a new technology on the market, hydrokinetic technology, which uses the speed of the water as opposed to the volume. So both hydro dam and runoff river, they require a volume of water.
Okay, so this is what Triet, your company, is like introducing this technology to Zambia. And what areas are you focusing on in the country to sort of initiate this product?
Yeah, so the beauty with this particular technology, and it works very well where you've got droughts, is that it's not specific. It's not very site specific. As long as you have running water at a certain speed, that is enough. And because of that, we have been mapping the country, and we found that at least 32 rivers in Zambia, which are perennial, can actually work very well with the technology. Literally, this is for the entire country. Every province will be covered because every province has got big enough rivers that move fast enough to harness this technology. So the beauty with this then is that it also brings in decentralization. It means you can generate power where the load is required. And so then you don't need to worry much about transmitting power over long distances, because when you transmit power over long distances, you've got losses that go with that. But also it's the capital cost associated with the infrastructure that you need to push that power. But if you can generate it wherever the load is, that helps. And it also helps to balance the entire electricity network if you can have multiple generations of power. And our technology works very well with generation of power in every province. Luapula, Northern, everywhere. You can generate power where you are easily on a river. Yes. You don't
because
need
there are rivers in every province in Zambia, right?
Yes, and we've identified all the rivers in every province where this can work.
Of course, this technology, I would like you to talk a little bit more on it. This technology in comparison to hydro, a dam or hydroelectricity power, what is the initial investment? Can you speak to that? what is the initial investment required for you to make this happen?
The initial investment is approximately, depending on what model you're using, the business model you're using, it can range from about $2 to $3 million per megawatt.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
And that is overly compensated by a very high capacity factor, because the capacity factor can go as high as 80 to 90% capacity factor, compared to, say, if you're talking about a hydro dam, it can be about 40, maximum 50% capacity factor. Solar about 20%. So the cost is completely compensated by the very high capacity factor.
Okay. Okay. Let's go back to one of these charts that you sent me here, and let's talk about this, Dr. Matsika.
Yes. So what we have here is there are three components that are very important. I think first we'll zero in on the middle one. They're going on with the generation, and even the government's interventions that they are promoting or putting in place, they are answering to the percent of electricity demand. Oh, can you hear me?
Okay, you were breaking up. Say that again.
Yeah, I don't know what's happening with the network. So over 50% of the consumption of electricity is by the mines. It's quite expected. Now, this can only get, I don't know if I can say more or better or worse. Because what's happening right now is in the north, you're probably aware that in the northwest of Zambia, we have new mines coming up. You've got Mlumwana,
Yes.
you've got Kalumbila. There's all that activity that is going on there. And the government anticipates to increase the copper production up to 3 million metric tons per annum. Now, Zambia has never hit 1 million metric tons. So for us to have the ambition to increase our production to 3 million metric tons will require a steep increase in electricity generation. As you can see, that's the bulk of that power goes to the mines. So that becomes the driver of what sort of power we need. And it even puts more pressure on everyone, both the government and the private sector, to work to come up with the innovative solutions to generate power much more than what we have at the moment. The last statement that came from the minister in May stated that by 2050, we need to generate about 23,000 megawatts of power. By 2026, we need to add another 6,000 megawatts. So you can see that there is so much happening, especially in the mining industry. You know about say Cobalt, this company which has found the largest copper ore in Zambia, for example. Sooner or later, they will start mining. So you can imagine how much power. So the power demand is increasing exponentially, especially once these mines come on stream. So that consumption drives the need for more generation. But also the other thing is about population increase.
Yes.
Zambia's population will double by, say, 2050, somewhere there. And it means that you need even more power for domestic purposes. You can see, I think on the extreme right, you see that the annual demand growth is about 5%. Now, there is a rural part of it that I'm quite passionate about. Currently, we sit at about 8% rural access. So if we have to raise that to even 50%, it means that we really have to double up on the extreme left column, which is the generation part of it. And therefore, we need to use all those in, potential generation, ways of generation, to ensure that we meet the consumption as it's been driven by the mining sector and increase in population. So we need to double up on the generation and come up with an energy mix that ensures energy security. And allow me to say, there is no silver bullet. There is no silver bullet. Yeah.
There is no silver bullet.
We need to have no, we need an energy mix to ensure energy security.
Yeah, I think that is true. I think our absolute dependence on the what you call it, hydropower has really cost us a little bit. What you are saying, Dr. Matsika, is I'm hearing you say it is even possible to have energy companies which are provincially based. Wouldn't that help the situation? If we have companies coming, or I'm going to insist on Zambian investors. If we get together and start provincial companies, how would that work?
It's quite interesting. So you're talking futuristically. So
yes.
There's something that has happened in the recent past. There is two acts that, to me, I think are game changers. The first act is called the Electricity Act of 2019. And then you have the Energy Regulation Act of 2019. They go hand in hand, these acts. And then beyond that, there are a number of statutory instruments that consolidate some of the articles within the acts. And for the first time in Zambia, we have an act, the Energy Act of 2019, that allows what are called independent power producers, IPPs. So these are people or companies that are other than ZESCO. So then ZESCO is not the only company that can generate power now. So the act allows these companies to generate power, and once they generate the power, they can then push this power into ZESCO itself, so they can sell the power to ZESCO. It's allowed. Then ZESCO can distribute or transmit and distribute. So most of these IPPs are working together with ZESCO. Then the other thing that off-grid supply of electricity, that is now allowable. So you can actually now sell directly to people that need power as an off-grid supply.
Interesting. So now
yes.
the other thing is, I keep hearing you say ZESCO. Some people don't even want to hear ZESCO, Dr. Matsika. So right, why ZESCO?
I think
why ZESCO?
Yeah.
Is it possible to unbundle ZESCO and allow for separate entities? Like, can we have another company come in and operate like ZESCO?
Interesting. You know, the same Electricity Act of 2019 makes it opens up the energy sector in a way that has never happened before. So there is a concept of what's called the open access. So open access means anyone can now use the ZESCO infrastructure to transmit power to wherever. If, for example, you are in Southern Province and you've got a client in Northern Province, now you can generate power and transmit it through the ZESCO infrastructure to, say, Mbala. And that is okay. ZESCO will charge you for the use of the infrastructure.
Oh,
So it's called the
okay.
open access. There's also what's called the net metering. Yes. So net metering is another concept. These have just been approved very recently by the government of Zambia. So net metering simply means if, for example, you've got a solar system at your house and you
Yes.
connect that to ZESCO. So sometimes maybe you're not using the power, then it automatically goes into the ZESCO line. Then at the end of the month, for example, or the agreed period of time, then you check who is owing who between the two. Is ZESCO owing you or you are owing ZESCO? So whoever is owing the other pays. Then again, you start another period. So that is, though those have been allowed, that allows people to participate, even at household level. You can participate in actually generating power and pushing it into the grid. So the open access is very important, and the net metering, those are absolutely important. So this, I think for me, we can't ask for more in terms of liberalizing the energy sector. Then you talked about unbundling.
Yeah.
So the government has been, they have come up with like an SPV. This SPV will be responsible for transmission and generation. It's part of the open access. It allows these other companies to put in power into the transmission lines onto distribution. So there's an SPV that will be looking specifically at the transmission and distribution of this power. So in a way, you can call it unbundling, but yes, that open access achieves the purpose of unbundling.
Okay. So in other words, government, the Energy Act of 2029 allows for another energy companies to coexist.
Of 2019.
Of 2019, sorry. Allows for energy companies to emerge and coexist along with ZESCO. Is that right?
Yes. Yes.
In
absolutely.
every form, everything that ZESCO does, another company can emerge and do exactly the same thing, so to speak.
Mostly, so what we have at the moment are the IPPs who are, because with the, I think it's important to just maybe understand the three sections of the way power is supplied. So you've got the generation part of it, then you've got the transmission part of it, and then with the distribution to the end user. So these can be considered three segments. So the IPPs, the independent power producers, fall under the generation. So they can generate power. Then they work with whoever has the infrastructure. Government has always allowed infrastructure for transmission. For example, you probably are aware of a company called CEC, Copper Belt Energy Corporation. They had their own transmission infrastructure. So it's allowed. So one can generate power, and it's called wheeling. The process is called wheeling. If you then put power through another person's infrastructure to your end user, that process is called wheeling. So it's a wheeling. So you sign what's called a wheeling agreement, and then they charge you for access, to access the infrastructure that you're talking about. So that has always been allowed. So CEC is a very good example. They've had their own infrastructure for many.
What about, is it Northwestern? There's a company called Northwestern something. Is it owned by
that
FAS president?
Yeah, so that one is, that was again, it shows that you can own a distribution company. So they are given the mandate by, I think it's by the mine there, to distribute power to a housing community.
Okay.
So they are able to do that, yes. So they've got like an agreement with ZESCO to distribute to a community. So that is allowable. And then also there are other companies right now who are in the process of building transmission lines within Zambia and into, say, Congo, just like CEC has done. So all that is allowable. Yeah. The issue was mostly around generation. which has now been granted through the IPP articles in the Energy Act of 2019.
Okay. Okay. This is what the viewers are saying. It is good to see a Zambian forging the way in this very important sector. It shows we have the brains here and we should support these initiatives. Okay. And thank you, everybody who's watching. Ms. Joy said, in the event there is no water due to climate change, the equipment cannot work at all. She's referring to your technology. Is that referring to your technology? How does that relate to your technology?
Now, the very interesting answer to this is, so if you consider the dam, okay?
Yes.
I think it's important to know that when you have a hydro dam, only approximately 10% of the water, the top part of the water, is used to generate power. The other one below, about 90% of it, is dead water. It's like standing on a ladder. So the other top 10% is just, it sits on top of the dead water just to be high enough so that when it goes down, it then converts from potential energy into kinetic energy. So now, with that in mind, you see that the hydro dams are far more sensitive to water levels than our technology. If we are, because of climate change, if by the time that our technology cannot work because of loss of water, the hydro dams would have been closed many years prior to that. So yes, for you to run our technology, you need a river to have water. But what we've discovered is, as we've been looking at the way the rivers are in Zambia, we've had droughts, even in the midst of this extremely dire situation that we're going through. The rivers are still flowing. And I think that's something that should give us the confidence that rivers are far more resilient than we could imagine. Because most of them, for example, they come from the equatorial region. They move from north down. Yes, so you still find water. We just last week, we spent a whole week on the Copper Belt. We went to Northwestern Province, just looking at rivers. And it's really interesting that in the midst of such a drought, all the perennial rivers are still running. They are not dry.
Okay.
So it should take a lot for yes.
Yeah.
It should take a lot for the rivers to dry.
To dry, yeah. Like Chimkaladi is saying, Zambia has enough rivers and lakes. There can never be a situation where there is no water. Less water, yes. No water, no. Thank you, Joshua, for joining us from Zambia. Yareka says that's a game changer indeed. I think she's referring to some of the things that you are mentioning. Open access will be a function of available network capacity.
Do you want me to comment on that?
Yes, please.
Yes,
Joseph seems to know what he's talking about, but the rest of us don't know.
Yeah, so now it's I think it's like even, for example, you've got a pipe or something, anything, wherever substance is flowing through something. So whether it's matter or whatever, it's electrons. So you've got, everything has got a capacity. You can only push in so much. Even, for example, if it's a pipe, it can only carry so much water, maybe at a certain speed. So you can't put continuously power into the system. It will reach a point where it's got its own capacity. If, for example, its capacity is 400 megawatts, that's what it can carry. And usually they don't allow it to reach those levels. They will even try to say, okay, let's give it a breathing space. Maybe let's make it 300, for example, to allow that 100 to be the fluctuation. Because what happens as we are transmitting power as well, there are a number of factors that become like constraints or limiting factors. For example, heating is one of them. Those wires tend to heat. So you should only be able to carry so much so that you don't overload the lines. So that is quite important. And for us, the way we are looking at it as from Triet energy point of view is, if we have decentralized generation of power across the country, it means now you don't have to rely on one source of generation, then you push power across. But instead, when you have these decentralized systems around the country, you remove or reduce the load on the main electricity network. You reduce the load, and that pressure can be reduced. Actually, decentralized generation can reduce the pressure on the lines. So open access can actually work even better with the technologies like ourselves, which is decentralized.
Okay. Matilda is asking, are there engineering plans to redirect water to the Kariba Dam?
That's a very interesting question, because that came up recently.
Oh, really?
I think engineers have been challenged. I mean, allow me to say something about this. So the way I started my life in the energy sector is I was working with Professor F.D. Yamba. So he's my mentor up to now. I'm still working with him. Even these projects that we are doing, we are working with him. So there's a project they did over 20 years ago where they recommended that we could divert water from where you've got rivers, like the Guapula, for example. You can then make big canals that bring water to the south. Because in Zambia, I hope you know that there are 3 ecological zones. So to say, we've got a lot of rainfall in the north, then we've got less, and then the southern part is got the lowest rainfall. So the idea was to redirect some of those rivers in the north and make channels. But recently, in a meeting that was held, I think with government, even some of the Chinese colleagues talked about that. Yes, you can engineer channels to move water from north to south. So from the engineering point of view, that is possible.
Okay.
But this feasibility study will be required to see if it is feasible.
Okay, very quickly here as we wind up our discussion, Lamek, we need to invest in better drainage system. All the rainwater goes to west. That's true, right?
Yes, so maybe that's not all the rain for water, because there are 3 places where you lose water. When you've got rain water coming, you have water that's runoff, like on the surface. Some of that even causes sedimentation and other problems. But then you've got the water that also percolates into the Earth's crust. Then you've got water that evaporates. So of late, there's been a push, like a real big push, to do water harvesting.
Okay.
So there's a lot of water. Yes, there are many projects now under, I think WAMA is aware of that. The Water Resources Management Authority is fully working with other entities to harvest water. So we'll see more dams, for example, where water is being harvested, and more canals that are specifically designed to direct water in a certain way. And there'll be quite a lot of water harvesting going on. Some of these are tanks that are, I think most of them that are being promoted are underground tanks, where you harvest water and then keep it underground and use it whenever you need to use it. So you can harvest rainwater through dams, and those projects are now coming to, they're being developed. And then the other type is just underground. You just make a tank underground and push water there. So that is actually ongoing at the moment. Yes.
Excellent. Derek says, can Dr. Matsika shed more light on the use of geothermal energy in Zambia?
Yeah, that one is quite an interesting one. So the geothermal, I'm assuming that they understand. It's Derek, yeah. I hope I take that Derek understands what geothermal technology really is. So Zambia has tried to apply geothermal some years back. In fact, it was Zesco, and I don't know it stood, that project. I think they want to revamp it. And then, but there's a company called Kalahari Geothermal. So you can read more about them if you just use Google. It talks more about Kalahari. I've got some good contacts with them. I've spoken to them. So
are they
have
operational in Zambia?
Yes, they've been doing explorations, because incidentally, geothermal is very similar to when you are looking for minerals. So you also need to do the sort of exploration that you do as though you are looking for minerals, because you are dealing with the earth's crust, because you have to find where the steam is. So they've been doing that for about 10 years, and they found where um, the spot is. It so happens to be in Lochinvar. Um, so of course they had to do many EIS, the environmental impact assessment, a lot, because it's in a national park, Lochinvar. But that's where they found the sweet spot, so to say, after they've been doing all their exploration. So the company is called Kalahari Geothermal Limited. You can read more about that from the internet. They believe that they can have a capacity of up to 500 megawatts. So that currently is the most, that's the one that has been developed the most as far as geothermal is concerned. They've been doing the exploration for 10 years, so they've got a lot of data around that and what they can do within that
there are a lot of questions about
and they will
water.
be doing a demonstration very soon.
Okay, when? I think if we go to their website, we should be able to find all this information you're talking about, right? On Kalahari Geothermal?
Yes, Kalahari Geothermal Company Limited.
Okay, all right. Okay, let's take one more question. Nasilele says, can you explain more on how the process of water harvesting works?
Okay, so now there are two ways. So you work with the experts to know the pattern of the rainfall. That's one. So I think we start with the end. For example, underground in tanks, you normally have to use gutters. So the roof. So you have to. Most of them are roof based. So you can have a roof that is so designed that's got a gutter that directs water into, say, a drainage of some sort, and then but it ends up in a tank underground. So that's one way. Yeah, it's quite common, and that's, in fact, there are projects in Monze, especially in the southern province. Those projects are quite successful. They've shown that you can just use the roof and collect the water on the roof, and it's easy even to calculate the quantities that you need. Yes. So just use the roof. You've got a gutter, the water that goes to waste, instead of leaving it to go to waste, you can actually allow it to go into an underground tank. And you can harvest a lot of water very easily. It's amazing. 50,000 liters, 100,000 liters, very easily. 1 million liters, quite easily, just using that. Then the other one, when you're talking about, especially if you're talking about dams, those are just directed where you ensure that you've got a landscape that allows water to be directed to a specific dam. So normally it can be a place that is naturally made like that with the potential of being a dam, or alternatively dig it and say this is it. I think we have one on the Copper Belt now where you deliberately dig out a dam and say this is where we'll be directing this water coming from this catchment area. Because if you understand the catchment area of the rainfall and the terrain, then you know to say, okay, we'll be able to direct this water into the reservoir that we have built. That's an open reservoir. Those are mostly the two ways that you harvest your rainwater. But most of the people who are doing dams, are using, the ones that are doing dams are mostly using it for irrigation, for example, or for animals and things like that.
I've noticed that, especially in the farming blocks, right?
Yes.
Especially in the farming blocks.
Farming blocks are doing that.
All right.
Yes.
The company that he talked about,
Yes.
I've put it up, Kalahari Geothermal Company Limited. Those of you who would like to look it up. Yeah.
Yes.
We need to wind this up. You all remember Dr. Matsika has already mentioned that he's on borrowed time here with the with his the things that he's using. He charged everything so that he could be able to do this, which we greatly appreciate. If you want to get in touch or you want information about the energy industry in Zambia, that's the email address there. Just one more question, Dr. Matsika, before we go. Just one more question.
Yes, please.
Thank you, everybody. I wish I could show all the comments. And like I've said, if we go beyond 1 hour, everything on his end will just die, okay? The final question probably we can ask is, how can the public be better educated about energy conservation and the benefits of renewable energy?
I think the first thing, I think we just need to do awareness raising in general, so through the media, but also it's making some of these subjects be part of curricula. I've been in academia for a long time, actually, as an academic, as a researcher. So I know the power of education system. So some of these things really should be part of, because they're so fundamental and so important. We need to make them also be part of our curriculum. But for the general public, we use the media, we use companies. There's also the corporate social responsibility aspects. So we can go into companies through some of these channels. One of the points I think that we haven't looked at, which is quite practical, is the energy conservation and energy efficiency aspects of this. So how do you use electricity responsibly? There's a moment where I go into a house, it's got 7 rooms, there's one person in the living room watching a TV, and all the lights in the whole house are on. Such kind of thing. So the end user part of it as well, in terms of that responsibility, I think it's something that needs to be educated also. And also to link it to what do you lose? So there's a bill, they hire the bill. So
exactly.
So we have to be a bit more conscious of the fact that it's not just about wasting energy, but also it's the cost that goes with that. So I think the awareness raising, promotion, people should be made aware of that, yes.
Excellent. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was our discussion for today. And our guest was Dr. Emmanuel Matsika. He is the founder of Triet Energy Zambia Limited and Triet Solutions, which looks at I like the way you put it when we started the conversation, Dr. Matsika, where you said every time you went back home to Zambia, you were talking to people that were just talking about problems, and nobody was coming up with
correct, that's right. Solutions, that's right, absolutely.
So we should provide solutions and not just focus on the negativity of the challenges, right?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Absolutely, yes. And that's how Triet Solutions was born, actually.
Excellent. Dr. Matsika, thank you. Everybody is saying we need a part 2. We can talk about maybe the solutions aspect of the company. I think we've covered the energy aspect of it. Thank you for taking the time.
To do that, yes.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time and for doing this in very difficult circumstances of not having power in your area.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
All right. All right, everybody, that was our show for today. Dr. Emmanuel Matsika, we're talking about Zambia's load shedding crisis. What are the possible solutions? So let's find ways to try and be part of the solution and make some investments. Have a great weekend. We shall see you next week.
for the third annual Gala Dinner. The Association of Zambians in Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia will this year host the third annual Gala Dinner on August 24th, 2024. There will be lots of exciting entertainment and we're expecting high-profile special guests. Be sure to stay glued to AZDMV Facebook page for more information. Save the date.
Zambia Blog Talk Radio.